Okay, so have you ever noticed, like when you're trying to get people to do something, like really trying to steer them in a direction you want them to go?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's your partner or your kids or maybe even coworkers sometimes, how often does that actually work?
Right.
Not as often as we'd like.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
And it's kind of exhausting, right?
Yeah.
So this is why I'm so excited for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Because we are going to be talking about Mel Robbins' book, The Let Them Theory, which offers a really interesting, different way to think about this.
Yeah, it's funny because it's such a simple idea,
Yeah.
but it has such profound effects, I think.
Yeah. And the basic idea is, what if, instead of trying to get people to change or to do things or to behave differently,
Right.
what if we just let them be?
Yeah, just let go.
And this is not about being a pushover.
Right.
It's actually like the opposite.
Exactly.
She actually says that this letting go can be incredibly empowering and lead to less stress, better relationships, and you achieving your goals.
And what's interesting is she came to this theory kind of the hard way.
Oh, really?
She was struggling, feeling overwhelmed with debt. She was dissatisfied with her job. There was tension in her marriage. Kind of sounds like a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
And so she kind of got to this breaking point and she started to question this whole idea of control.
Yeah.
Like, why are we trying to control everything and everyone around us?
Yeah. And was it helping?
Well, that's the thing. She realized it was actually making things worse. That this need for control that we have was actually creating more stress, more conflict. The more she tried to force things to go her way, the more resistance she met.
Oh, that makes sense.
I don't know if that sounds familiar to you.
Totally, yeah.
And there's this one story she tells in the book about her son's high school prom.
Oh, yeah.
And, she's picturing everything going wrong, as parents do, and she's driving everyone crazy with her worries.
Yeah.
And then she has this epiphany where she realizes she is fighting a losing battle trying to control a bunch of teenagers in the weather.
Yeah.
So she just decides to let go.
Okay, so what happened?
Well, guess what? Everyone, including herself, had a much better time.
Interesting.
And so it's a great example of how surrendering control can actually lead to more positive outcomes.
So I have a question for you listening right now.
Yeah.
Are there things in your life where you are holding on too tight?
Right.
And is that creating unnecessary stress?
I think we all do it to some extent.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so this brings us to the heart of the let them theory, right?
Okay.
Which is accepting that we can't control other people's choices or actions, but we can control our own reactions.
Okay, so that's the let them part, right?
Right.
But there's another side to that.
There is.
Look at that.
It's not just about letting them do their thing, it's also about letting yourself focus on what you can control.
Oh, okay.
And that's where the let me part comes in.
I love that.
It's about shifting that focus inward and recognizing your own agency.
Yeah.
So while we can't control those external circumstances or other people's decisions, we can control our actions, our responses, and ultimately our own choices. And she illustrates this with some really great examples in the book.
Like one.
So one is where she sees, her friends are having this awesome girls' weekend trip,
Okay.
and she's feeling a little left out and hurt at first.
Yeah, total FOMO.
Right, exactly. And so,
What does she do?
well, instead of going down that spiral of, negative self-talk and blaming her friends, she consciously chose to let them enjoy their trip and not make it about her.
Okay, so that's let them.
Right.
But then what about let me?
Well, then she took it a step further and said, okay, let me focus on what I can control.
Okay.
My own happiness, my own social life. And she realized, she'd been working too much. She'd been neglecting some of her friendships.
Yeah.
And let me helped her to kind of shift her priority.
Of taking back the reins of your own life.
Yeah.
But what about those times when people are being difficult?
Right.
Like the silent treatments, the guilt trips, all that fun stuff.
All the adult tantrums, as she calls them.
Adult tantrums, I love that.
Right.
So does let them still apply?
It does, and it can feel counterintuitive, I think.
It does.
But what she says is that when you get sucked into someone else's drama, you're basically giving them power over you. It's like adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
And so instead, she suggests we consciously choose to detach from that. protects your own energy and not let their behavior kind of dictate your mood.
So it's not that you're condoning the behavior, it's
Right.
that you're setting a boundary.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that you can't control their actions, but you can control how you respond to them.
And that leads us to, I think, another really important point, which is that this whole let them idea helps you focus on what you can control.
Yes.
Which often means like overcoming our own fears and insecurities.
Right.
So Robbins actually shares her own story about wanting to be a motivational speaker,
Yeah.
but feeling paralyzed by the fear of being judged.
It's so relatable.
It's so relatable.
I think a lot of us hold ourselves back because of what other people might think.
For sure.
So her advice is to focus on your values and make choices that make you proud.
So I have a question for you, listener, right now.
Okay.
Are you holding yourself back from something that you truly want
Right.
because of what someone else might say or think? And I know what you're thinking.
What's that?
You're thinking, but I don't want people to think negatively about me.
Yeah, that's a common fear.
So what do we do about that?
Well, Robbins says you can't control their thoughts,
Right.
but you can control how you react to them.
Good.
So don't give those negative thoughts rent-free space in your head.
Okay.
It's about reclaiming your mental real estate
Right.
and focusing on what matters to you.
Yeah. And this leads us to another area where I think this can be really helpful,
Oh, yeah.
which is family relationships.
Oh, boy.
Because that can be so complicated.
It can be so charged.
It can. And she thinks that this idea of let them can be really helpful in navigating family dynamics.
Yeah, and I think the key here is this concept she talks about called frame of reference.
Okay, frame of reference. Explain that.
So frame of reference is about understanding that each person views the world through this lens, shaped by their own experiences, their beliefs, and their fears.
So it's not just about what they're saying.
Right.
It's about understanding the why behind it.
Exactly. And she gives this great example about her husband, Chris, and her mother.
Okay.
So initially, her mom wasn't thrilled about Chris,
Oh, no.
not because of who he was, but because he was from the East Coast.
Oh, she didn't want her to move away.
Exactly. She was afraid of her daughter moving far away.
Wow.
And so once she understood her mother's frame of reference, she could approach the situation with more empathy and compassion.
So it wasn't about Chris. It was about her fear of losing her daughter.
Exactly.
So that's a great example
Yeah.
of like seeing things from their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Absolutely. And this tool can be so helpful in all kinds of relationships. It helps us to detach from our own emotional reactions and create space for understanding.
Yeah, like walk a mile in their shoes.
Exactly.
And this leads us to another big one,
What's that?
the comparison game,
Oh, yeah.
which is so huge these days.
Especially with social media, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You're constantly bombarded with everyone's seemingly perfect lives.
The perfect house, the perfect vacation.
Yeah, and it's easy to feel like we're falling short.
Totally. And so she acknowledges this trap.
She does.
And what does she suggest?
Well, she offers a really brilliant reframing, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of seeing comparison as a threat, she suggests that we view it as inspiration or a learning opportunity.
That's interesting.
So it's not about putting ourselves down.
Yeah.
It's about using those comparisons to motivate us to grow and improve.
So it's like they're trying to teach us something. And she even tells a story about how her jealousy toward a friend's beautiful home actually motivated her to achieve her own goals. So instead of being resentful, she was like, what can I learn from this?
Exactly. So I have a question for you, listener.
Okay.
What is your comparison trying to teach you?
Yeah.
Where are you maybe letting yourself down?
That is such a good question.
It's about kind of getting honest with ourselves and taking ownership of our choices.
So speaking of ownership,
Yeah.
this brings us to the let me aspect of navigating friendships.
Friendships.
Because friendships as adults
Oh, it's so hard.
are hard.
Yeah.
They're not like they were when we were in school.
No.
What does she say about that?
Well, she calls it the great scattering.
The great scattering.
You know, when we were younger, we had that built-in social structure.
Yeah.
We saw our friends every day. We shared experiences, and we built those bonds so naturally.
Yeah.
But as adults, we change jobs. Our lives just kind of diverge.
And that makes it harder to stay close. So she has 3 pillars of friendship.
She does.
What are they?
They're proximity, timing, and energy.
Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
So proximity is pretty obvious.
Right, it's physical closeness.
Okay.
And, you know, back in school, you were constantly surrounded by people your own age.
Yeah.
You saw them every day, you shared experiences, you built those bonds.
But then as adults, we move away.
We do.
We change jobs.
Yeah.
Our lives go in different directions, and that makes it harder.
Exactly.
Okay, proximity timing.
So timing is about being in similar stages of life.
Okay.
You know, when we're younger, most of our peers are hitting the same milestones.
Yeah.
You know, graduating, starting careers, maybe getting married, starting families.
Yeah, it's like you're all in the same boat,
Exactly.
going through the same things.
Right. But as we get older,
Yeah.
those timelines shift. You know, some people prioritize career, others focus on family, some travel the world.
Yeah.
And so those differences can impact the dynamics of our friendships.
Okay, timing and energy. What's energy?
So energy is that intangible connection, that sense of compatibility and shared interests.
Okay.
And sometimes even if you have the proximity and the timing, the energy just isn't there.
So like those friendships that just naturally kind of fade,
Exactly.
even though there wasn't like a big blow up or anything.
And Robbins argues that these changes in those three pillars are often the reason why friendships fade. And it's usually not personal.
Yeah.
It's just life.
Yeah.
So this is where let them comes in.
Okay.
She encourages us to let go of friendships that are no longer serving us
Okay.
or that have run their course.
But what if you've let go
Uh-huh.
and you feel like you just don't have any friends at all?
Right.
Like, what do you do then?
Well, she addresses that too.
Okay, good.
And she actually shares her own experience of moving to a new town in her 50s and feeling totally isolated.
Oh, wow. Starting over.
It can be really daunting,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to build that social circle. And so she emphasizes the importance of taking action, of being the one to go first.
So instead of waiting for an invitation,
All right.
you're being proactive.
Exactly. And she offers some practical advice.
Like what?
Introduce yourself, strike up conversations, extend invitations.
So simple.
It is.
But I bet it's hard.
It can be.
Yeah.
But it's those small efforts that can lead to really meaningful connections.
Like ripping off the Band-Aid.
It is.
Yeah.
And she actually shares this story about how she met one of her closest friends just by knocking on her neighbor's door and introducing herself.
Wow.
Small act of courage, big reward.
That's awesome.
It is.
So it shows that it can really pay off to put yourself out there.
Yeah, and this approach can apply to nurturing our existing relationships as well.
Okay.
You know, let me could mean being the friend you wish you had.
Oh, yeah.
The one who reaches out, the one who plans the get-togethers, the one who puts in the effort.
Instead of waiting for someone else to do it.
Exactly.
Right.
It's about shifting from that passive mindset to an active one and being intentional about those connections.
I like that.
And that leads us to something I think a lot of us struggle with.
Yeah, what's that?
Wanting to change someone else's behavior.
Oh, yeah, that's universal.
Whether it's our partner, our kids, our parents, even our coworkers sometimes.
Oh, totally. And it never works.
Well, she dives into the science of why change is so hard, why pressure often backfires, and how our need for control can actually create gridlock in our relationships.
It's like the classic nagging spouse.
Right.
Or the frustrated parent trying to get their kid to clean their room.
And the more we push, the more resistance we encounter.
Yeah.
And so she offers a really helpful framework for influencing change without resorting to pressure or control.
Okay.
And she calls it the ABC loop.
The ABC loop. I've never heard of that.
It stands for apologize, back off, and celebrate.
Okay, break that down for me.
Okay, so first apologize.
Apologize for what?
Well, because sometimes our past attempts at control might have been hurtful or unproductive.
Yeah.
So this is about acknowledging our part in it
Okay.
and creating space for more open communication.
Taking ownership.
Exactly. And it's not just about saying I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's about asking open-ended questions and genuinely trying to understand the other person's perspective.
Okay, so instead of like lecturing them,
Right.
you're listening.
You're trying to understand where they're coming from.
Okay, I like that.
And once you've apologized and asked those questions, the next step is to back off.
Back off, really.
Yeah.
It seems like you'd want to stay engaged.
It can feel counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but what she says is that giving them space is crucial
Okay.
because it allows them to process that conversation, to reflect, and to come to their own conclusions.
It's about respecting their autonomy.
It is.
Yeah.
Recognizing that we can't force change,
Yeah.
but we can create an environment where change is more likely to occur.
So it's like setting the stage.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're not controlling the actors.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. And then the last step, celebrate.
Yes.
Celebrate. So it's not like waiting for them to mess up.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's about positive reinforcement.
Okay.
So when you see them making progress, even small steps, you acknowledge and appreciate those efforts.
So you're creating a positive association.
Right, and celebrating doesn't have to be this big, grand gesture.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as expressing sincere appreciation or offering words of encouragement.
Okay.
So it's about creating a supportive environment rather than one of constant criticism.
That makes sense.
And Robbins also reminds us that, while the ABC loop can be powerful, we can't force someone to change if they're not ready.
Right.
It goes back to that core idea. We
Yeah.
can't control their choices, only our own actions and reactions.
Right, yeah. And this leads us to something I think can be really tough,
What's that?
which is, what about when someone we love is struggling with a serious issue,
Yeah.
like addiction or mental health challenges or something?
Right. It can be heartbreaking to watch someone you care about go through difficult times.
Yeah. So what does she say about that?
Well, she cautions against rescuing.
Rescuing.
Yeah, trying to fix or shield them from the natural consequences of their actions might actually enable them.
Yeah.
And she quotes Dr. Robert Waldinger, who says, "Let people learn from life." It's about trusting in their resilience and their ability to grow through these challenges.
So that doesn't mean we abandon them.
Right. It means finding that balance between offering support and holding healthy boundaries.
Right.
We can be there for them, listen without judgment, and believe in their capacity to overcome those challenges.
Yeah.
But we can't do it for them.
And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them face the consequences
Yeah.
and learn their own lessons.
It's hard, but it's true.
Yeah, and this actually brings us to the most important relationship of all,
What's that?
the one we have with ourselves.
Self-love.
Self-love. And how does that fit into let them?
Well, when we stop trying to control others, we free up so much energy to focus on our own well-being. And so she asks, do you offer yourself the same kindness and compassion that you extend to others?
That's a good one.
Right. Are we as understanding and forgiving with ourselves as we are with the people we love?
I think that can be really hard.
It can be.
Yeah.
And she emphasizes that self-love is about treating ourselves with the same respect and care we would offer to someone we cherish.
Okay.
It's about recognizing our own worth and making choices that honor our values and dreams.
And realizing that we don't need anyone else's permission to
Right.
be happy.
To pursue our passions, to live a life that feels authentic and meaningful.
And I love this quote.
What is it?
Let them be who they are.
Yeah,
But more importantly, let yourself be who you truly are.
it's so powerful.
So good. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right?
There's so much more to unpack in this book.
There is. Yeah, it really is a profound shift.
There is like a whole new way of looking at things.
Yeah, and she uses this great metaphor to kind of illustrate this whole idea of let them,
It's okay.
the sky.
The sky.
Okay.
Yeah.
So imagine the sky, right? It's constantly changing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's clear and blue, sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's stormy.
Yeah.
We can't control the weather.
Right.
Just like we can't control external circumstances or other people's choices.
We can't make the sun come out.
Right, exactly.
If it's raining, we can't make it stop raining.
But we can control how we respond to it.
Oh, okay.
We can choose to dance in the rain or, find shelter from the storm or simply appreciate the beauty of a cloudy day.
So it's like life has ups and downs.
Yeah.
It throws curveballs at us.
It does.
And it's not about like wishing those things away.
Right.
It's about navigating them.
Learning to ride the waves.
Yeah.
And when we apply that to our relationships, it's
Uh-huh.
about accepting that people are who they are. Their choices, even if we don't agree with them, don't diminish our worth
Okay.
or our ability to create a fulfilling life.
So it's like instead of trying to change the sky,
Right.
we can focus on building a good shelter.
Exactly.
The weather the storms.
Yeah, and enjoy the sunshine when it's there.
Yeah. Okay, I like that.
And speaking of happiness,
Oh, happiness. That's a good segue.
there's another important aspect of this let them theory that we haven't talked about.
What's that?
Forgiveness.
Oh, forgiveness. Okay. Yeah, that's a big one.
It is.
Because holding on to resentment and anger
Uh-huh.
is not good for us.
You can
It
know.
really weighs us down.
It's like carrying around a heavy backpack full of rocks.
Oh, I like that metaphor.
Right.
Okay, so she says forgiveness is important.
It's essential for both let them and let me.
Okay, so how does forgiveness play into this whole let them thing?
Well, when we forgive others,
Right.
we're releasing them from the burden of our judgment and our anger.
Right.
It's not about condoning their actions.
Right.
But it's about freeing ourselves. from that emotional grip that they have on us.
So it's not for them, it's for us.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a gift we give ourselves.
And sometimes it's hard.
It is. And she reminds us that forgiveness is a process.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a one-time event.
Yeah.
It might take time and effort, but ultimately it's a choice we make to move forward.
Yeah.
And create a more positive, fulfilling life for ourselves.
To unpack those rocks.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so then what about let me and forgiveness?
Well, that's about extending that same grace and compassion to ourselves.
Well,
you know, we all make mistakes. We all have regrets.
Yeah.
And it's so important to forgive ourselves for those past missteps and move forward with self-acceptance and love.
Because we're human.
We are.
We're imperfect.
And we deserve forgiveness.
We do, even from ourselves.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up this section on forgiveness,
Yeah.
I think the main takeaway is that it's essential,
It is.
both for our own well-being
Yeah.
and for our relationships.
It allows us to learn from our mistakes, to make amends where necessary, and to ultimately become the best versions of ourselves.
And I love how she ties this back to the sky metaphor.
Oh, how does she do that? She says that, sometimes the sky is stormy.
Yeah,
But even storms eventually pass.
they do.
And the sun comes out again.
And just like with the weather, we can't control when those storms will come or how long they'll last.
Right.
But we can choose to weather them with grace and resilience and trust that the sun will eventually shine again.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful metaphor for life in general.
I agree. Yeah, it's a huge first step, isn't it? Just noticing when we're doing that.
Yeah, like where are you trying to control something that you really have no control over?
Right, exactly. And I think for a lot of us, we do it unconsciously.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like a habit.
Yeah.
And so bringing that awareness to it is really the first step to changing it.
Yeah, and once you're aware of it,
Uh-huh.
then you can start to make conscious choices about how you're going to respond.
Right, exactly.
So do you want to keep banging your head against that wall?
Yeah.
Or do you want to choose a different path?
One that's going to lead you to more peace,
Yeah.
less stress.
Yeah, and more happiness,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Right. And I think it's about shifting from that mindset of resistance
Yeah.
to a mindset of acceptance.
And that doesn't mean you become passive.
Right. It doesn't mean you give up.
No.
It's about recognizing what you can and cannot control.
Right.
And then focusing your energy on those things you can influence.
Your own thoughts.
Right.
Your own actions,
Yes.
your own choices.
Ultimately, your own experience of life.
And I think that leads us to what might be the most important takeaway from this book,
Okay.
which is that true freedom comes from letting go.
Oh, I love that.
Letting go of the need to control,
Right.
letting go of resentment and anger, letting go of expectations that are just weighing us down,
It's like giving ourselves permission to just breathe, to
Yeah.
relax,
to just
to
be.
play.
And I think in that space of letting go,
Yeah.
we create room for something new.
New possibilities, new
Mhm.
connections, new ways of being in the world.
It's about trusting that life will unfold as it should.
Even if it's not exactly how we planned it.
And sometimes those detours
Yeah.
lead us to something even better.
I love that.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the let them theory,
Yeah.
I think it's clear that this book offers so much more than a simple idea.
It's like a whole new way of approaching life.
It is a new lens to look through.
Yeah. And it's a really empowering one, I think.
So we encourage you to pick up a copy of the book and dive in for yourself.
Yeah. You might be surprised at how much this simple but profound concept can really transform your life.
And as always, we want to hear from you.
Yeah. Tell us what you think.
What resonated with you most from our deep dive?
What are your biggest takeaways?
Are you going to try this in your own life?
Yeah, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the let them theory.
It's been fun.